Alright, this is the last video about America becoming a world power. This is Taft and Wilson foreign diplomacy, okay? Now, when Taft takes over, he had the saying was he was supposed to follow Teddy Roosevelt as president. Roosevelt had the big stick policy. Taft had the dollar diplomacy, and Taft would say, I'm substituting dollars for bullets. Basically, the short of dollar diplomacy was U.S. businesses would invest in countries to convince them to be friendly to us. We're buying friends. Okay, that's what Taft was basically going on. Now, the problem is, in Latin America, we kind of created a system that was called banana republics, not the store. But a banana republic is a country that is a third world country that depended on one main crop as their export, and they happen to fall into the hands of dictators a lot. This happened in Chile and in Argentina, El Salvador, a lot of countries there, and it was because of U.S. investment there, and we didn't necessarily look where we were going, what we were basically doing. So that is dollar diplomacy. Now, when Wilson becomes president in 1912, his was called moral or missionary diplomacy. He felt that the United States was the biggest and best moral country, and as such we should show that example to the rest of the world. Now, ultimately we do get involved because of this in World War I, but we'll see how that comes up as we get to it. Now, Wilson had a problem, and that was Mexico. Now, this is way much earlier. In the 1800s, there was actually a Mexican-American War. This is the famed Battle of the Alamo, if you've ever heard of that, Santa Anna, etc. All the area that's there in the kind of tan, lightish color, that was all ceded to the United States from Mexico as a result of this war. And I mean, just look at the states, the whole of California, the whole of Nevada, the whole of Utah, almost all of Arizona, as well as parts of Colorado and New Mexico and Wyoming. So this is a lot of area, right? And people have felt bad about this for a long time. Enter. Mexico actually goes through a crazy time here, and they're running through people pretty quickly. There was a guy named Porfirio Diaz, and he was more or less seen as a dictator, and that was horrible. He is replaced with Francisco Madero, again a dictator, and things are kind of getting crazy, right? All right. So we have the Tampico incident. Okay. The next president to come along was a guy named Huerta. Okay. And the Tampico incident. All right. Some U.S. sailors are in Tampico, which is right across the border. They're basically abused and stripped in their underwear and just kind of humiliated, okay? Wilson says Huerta's going to have to salute us, or the Atlantic Fleet will seize Tampico and as well Veracruz, it's a big port city in Mexico. And so they went to enforce this demand. Congress is behind him. And in the end, the whole goal is to get rid of Huerta, all right? Because, again, he's a military dictator. Now, with him gone, there are three people vying for power. A guy named Carranza, a guy named Villa, and lastly, a guy named Zapata. All right? So the U.S. decided our best interest was to back Carranza. So we back Carranza, and we say he's there, and we'll give him all this money, and we think he's great. Problem is, he's just like all the other people we've talked about. He's a military dictator. Enter Pancho Villa. Pancho Villa said that the Mexican Revolution stopped short of its goal, and that was to be a agrarian revolution, because Mexico is largely an agrarian or farmer society. And so what he did is he led these raids on Carranza, sometimes working with Zapata, sometimes working against him, and maybe that was in the end. Now, he actually got a reward put on his head, and they basically wanted to get around this guy. Now, didn't have anything to do with cheese dip. That's a Memphis thing. So, no Pancho cheese dip, right? That's wrong, Pancho Villa. So, Pancho Villa decides, I'm going to get the United States to invade and come after Carranza to see how bad things are. So his goal was get them involved. So what he does is he crosses the border to Columbus, New Mexico, and he basically burns the city. There's some death and destruction, and so naturally this gathers Wilson's attention. He will send General John Pershing, who is nicknamed Blackjack, for his affiliation of that game, and he is to go and find Pancho Villa. Along these whole lines, he's doing this. On the end, they do catch Pancho Villa. His own people in Mexico catch Pancho Villa, not the United States. Also at this time, and so I've kind of left Mexico dangling, and I'll get back to in World War I. The U.S. will purchase the Virgin Islands, and it's there in the little red dot circled on the map. The whole purpose of this was to protect the newly created Panama Canal, which is going to be kind of down in the area beneath that. And so the Virgin Islands were there so that we could station boats if we had to and make sure that people couldn't mess with the control of the canal. All right? So that's the end of America becoming world power. The next unit we have is World War I, and that's a fun one.